Let's give him a hand as he comes on up. I will let you introduce yourself.
My name is Gutierrez, or Israel Gutierrez. I am the writer-director.
Yeah, and give him a hand. So for our audience people and for those watching, the big reason we do these is to encourage our audience members to create their own work, and for them to learn is to hearing from people who've done it and been there and survived. And it always takes a village. So you actually have a couple, 1 or 2 cast members here. So if you want to acknowledge them.
Yeah, I do. I have Rafa, who played Rafa in the film, who's sitting right there. Louis, who was on screen for a short time, but he was on there. And we have Carrie in the back there, who was one of the officers during that intense scene.
Very cool. So it always starts with story and script because you can't move forward without that. So how did the story come to be? Kind of how did the script process come to be? Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I mean, as a Latino and an immigrant, even though I've been here most of my life, things of immigration, Latino issues are pretty important to me. And I find a lot of those issues tend to kind of lose the human side of it. They get kind of categorized into numbers or statistics. And, I have an issue with that. And that goes, with a lot of issues in society with minorities, not just Latinos. But I wanted to tell a story where I can connect the audience, whether you agree with the politics or not. I wanted to connect the audience to the human side. So I wanted to connect them to characters, and that's pretty much where the idea came from. I did tons of research. I spent months researching, and that's not even just writing it. That's just like researching all the immigration, all the small details. I kind of made it into the film about what it's like and what people have gone through. And through that process, I read about people getting married on bridges, on the bridge that connects El Paso and Juarez, as well as the river, people getting on boats, and there's YouTube videos and stuff of people doing that. And again, I wanted to know what's the human side of the story, but it's always very general and short. But I wanted to know what's going on with these people. Who are these people? And that's where I came up with the idea of capturing these people in the middle of something and kind of seeing their struggle for after the deportation. And again, that was my attempt to connect the audience with something and have the political and social issue in the background of the story. So again, after tons of research, and then a few more months of writing and getting kind of that narrative with the backstory and the flashbacks and all that. But I wanted to include as much real life detail. And again, even though the whole story is a fictionalized story, it is all based on things that happen to real people. So every little aspect of that, the DUI checkpoints was a big controversy, like, back around 2008, especially like in the Inland Empire. And that's all based on something real. The migrant shelter, it's all based on something real. So after all that research, again, I just started to kind of form the narrative and trying to figure out how I can connect people and everyone can relate to loss and separation. And that's kind of why I decided to go that. And I put some personal experience in there as well as far as the flashbacks, just to give it a little more depth and also just for me. So.
Sometimes people writing short films struggle with how much is too much, when is it too much. You don't want to cram a feature into a short film. You want to make it, So kind of talk about that process of writing and going, okay, what was that process for you like?
Yeah, that's one of the first things that I told myself is don't, shoot at so many locations. Don't cram that feature into it. But the story compelled me. So after even just writing a very, very rough draft of the short film, it just grabbed me. And a lot of times, when you're writing, you just have to go with it. The story kind of tells you where to go. And yeah, once I did that, I mean, I would probably say a few drafts in, I kind of thought this is a feature. And I kind of went in thinking, I'm not going to lie, that, I may want to use this as a calling card for a feature. And that's pretty much what I've been trying to do. I mean, I've written a feature version of the script, but as far as a short, yeah, you never want to try to cram as much stuff. I mean, even with this one, with all the locations, and there's a lot of information there. But again, it's just, because of the message that I was trying to tell and, you know, my future plans with it, I went ahead and just did it. But that definitely wouldn't be something that I would recommend or that I was normally going to. Something simple, as little locations as possible. But again, that story just kind of grabbed me by the you-know-what and just said, you know, write me.
How many drafts, kind of what was like the whole kind of, when did you know you got to the final draft?
Never. I mean, yeah, no, like you never stop. Like, yeah. When we started shooting principal photography, I think I was at about 12 drafts. Yeah, it was about 12 drafts. And again, it didn't stop because even, you know, shooting for first few days and you start thinking about the next scenes and, you know, dumb writer I am, I'm like, no, let's change something and let's do something else. Or I saw something in, you know, in what we shot. And so it never stops. But as far as an official draft, I did about 12 drafts. And then some stuff changed when we shot the river scene because we had to shoot that a couple of months after principal photography. So even that, I changed stuff. So.
About how long in those 12 drafts did it take you to write? A couple months, 6 months?
So the way it works is this was a Chapman University Dodge College of Film thesis. So it starts off in the spring. So in the spring of 2013, we had a thesis prep class that you prepare with your thesis mentor. And that's kind of where I threw a couple ideas around, and that's where you should start. I spent pretty much the whole summer of 2013, again, first couple of months or 3 months or so, just researching, trying to get, you know, influence and think of, you know, narratives. And then I spent up until probably September writing more drafts. So I spent that whole summer, and actually because we got pushed back to the end of the year for shooting, I pretty much wrote up probably up until October. I was just writing. So, yeah, it took a while.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about getting your producer. We were just talking a little bit about that and the process of building that team, because obviously it takes more than one person to make a film. So producers are usually the first place you start.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, both Natalies couldn't be here. But so the way it worked, we had everything that you can think of that can go wrong on a film as far as a student film. I mean, we had a lot of challenges. And one of the challenges that we had is we were originally scheduled to shoot at the beginning of 2013. Well, I'm sorry, the fall of 2013, the beginning of the semester. And because of the scope of the film and other things, we had to get pushed. And there was a limited number of producing students that were available in my class year. So it just kind of threw everything into a mess, and we had to push back our film. And so with the school and everything, I was introduced to both Natalies, and then that's kind of how we teamed up. And then from then on, it was a moving train. I mean, once it started going, like there was no stopping it. So it was just, you know, pre-production meetings and them getting caught up on how far I've gotten with the script and things like that. So that's kind of how that team happened. Everyone else I had worked with before. So we were all very close and had success on another short film. So DP, editor, production designer, and sound designer, we all had worked together a few times, so we were all very close.
So for an actor who maybe is looking to do their first short film, talk a little bit about those production meetings. Is it just a checklist of things you go through first? What are some of the kind of things you go, okay, we need to secure locations first, or we need to secure this first? Kind of talk about that process.
Yeah, pre-production meetings are extremely important. I mean, I like to really go in prepared. I mean, with every little detail. And pre-production meetings with every department are essential because, especially as a director-writer, you want to make sure everyone's on the same page. You want to make sure that everyone knows what your vision of it is, how you want it to look, how you want it to sound, the blocking, how the performances are going to be. So whatever that vision is, you have to make sure everyone's on the same page. And there's no way to do that without communicating through pre-production meetings. So personally, yeah, I mean, it's a checklist of things. I mean, whatever the issue was for that week, we had weekly meetings. So, for example, if it was an issue of location, if it was an update on how's casting going, how's the location going, things like that. So, yeah, every week it was a checklist of things like what do we need to talk about. And that's the importance of having a really good producer is, you know, to have an agenda. And that's what we had. We had agendas. You know, this week we need to cover this. We need to make sure we've, again, locked these locations. We've figured this stuff out for budget, for equipment. And I personally like to have personal, like kind of one-on-ones with the department, because sometimes things get left, untold or whatever during meetings. So having these one-on-ones with, my DP, my production designer, and everyone else, I think helps a lot, because then you get into these really personal conversations. Pre-production meetings are extremely important. Yeah.
From the time that your producers came on board till the first day of shooting, about how long, how many months was that process?
So the beginning of the semester was, the end of August, beginning of September. So we teamed up pretty much. Probably was like maybe towards the end of September, maybe mid-September. I'm trying to remember exactly. So yeah, and then we shot at the beginning of December. So we had a few months which was really needed, because we had so much stuff happen, like locations that we lost. So yeah, it was a few months and we really needed it, and that wasn't even enough time with all the stuff that was happening. So,
how many locations did you have in the film?
So let's see, we had the river. We had one location that we used as both the migrant shelter and Juarez. So that was one area. So that's two. We had a location in Orange. We had a location in near Riverside, that Yurupa Valley. So yeah, there was quite a few. We were trying to condense as much as possible. So like that one area in LA where we tried to shoot Juarez and the migrant shelter, we tried to shoot as much stuff there. Oh, and the DUI checkpoint was shot there. So different parts of that area we were able to use. And that came about because we lost another location. So we lost 2 major locations throughout pre-production.
Did you think it worked out at the end, because you were able to kind of, the less locations you change, the easier it is to get as many shots, pages done, and stuff like that? So looking back on it, you're like, okay, it kind of maybe saved some of your days or anything like that, or was it just a huge struggle that you wish didn't work out that way?
Yeah, well, because of the story and the way it was written, I mean, the multiple locations was unfortunately what we had to deal with. But if you can find a location where you can shoot multiple things all together, it saves you, not just travel expenses, but you can, for example, when we shot the migrant shelter, it was all built on a stage. So we were able to leave equipment there. We were able to leave all that. And it just saves you money. It saves you time where you can get more shots. You're not breaking down. You're not striking things. You can just leave stuff there. And so, yeah, that definitely saved us a lot. So, yeah.
Talk a little bit about your fundraising. How did you raise the money to make it happen?
We get some money from the school. We also got a couple of grants. We got a Leo Friedman grant from Chapman. We applied to the Panavision New Filmmaker grant, which was amazing because we saved a ton of money. For the amount of equipment that we got through Panavision, saved us a ton of money from not just me, but my DP. So that was great. But the rest of it was, personal money. I did a little bit of fundraising, but it could have been better. That takes a lot of time. I think that was one of my learning experiences. If you're going to fundraise, you have to really commit and go forward with it, because otherwise it just becomes a waste. And I got some, but the majority of it was either personal or through grants.
The Panavision grant, is that something that DP brought to your attention, or did you already know about it, or how did that kind of?
Yeah, he might have. I think it was some kind of like common knowledge throughout the school, because other people had applied. But yeah, every year you hear people applying for it. So again, it was more common knowledge. But yeah, he definitely wanted it because we wanted to shoot with 2 cameras, and depending on whether we got the grant or not, and I also wanted to shoot with 2 cameras, but yeah, so that it's common knowledge, but the DP and myself were very excited about it, because like I said, the way we were going to shoot, in order to get as much coverage as we could for editing and the scope of the film, it was important that we did the 2 cameras, and that's even hard because that's a lot of prep.
Talk a little bit about casting. We have some of the actors here, and for the actors in the audience, but as actors come in, what drew your attention to certain actors versus others? What made you like, oh, okay, this is someone that I want to maybe have a callback? What did they do in the room?
Yeah, well, to preface, I had a casting director, which helped out a lot, because she's also an actress. Her name's Kathleen McGowan. She did a lot of the work and legwork in terms of, making sure that she, chose the right actors to come in. So once I would come in, we would have chemistry reads. And I think what really drew me, honestly, it's that charisma and out of the box thinking that came into the characters, because so many times in auditions, things come up that you just didn't think about. You know, actors read it differently, and not necessarily in a bad way. They just might read it differently, where it's like, whoa, kind of opens your eyes to a new way to look at it. But yeah, also the main thing for me, especially with this film, is I wanted to make sure the two actors, the leads, you know, had chemistry. I wanted to feel like they were together, not just for that short 29 minutes, like where it would look like they were together for a while. And so that was important. We had a lot of really good actors that came in, actors that I knew, but at times just didn't fit, you know. So again, it was the chemistry. It was watching the two actors working off of each other, you know, even if it meant a little bit of improvising. But for me, it was, do they have chemistry? You know, so even actors who were great, but just didn't necessarily fit maybe with the other actor, or maybe just brought a different feel to the film. You know, again, it's nothing on the actor. It just wasn't the right thing for the story. But I didn't want two actors that kissed and hugged and were in love on film, at least on screen, but just didn't seem like they were, you know, one couple. And that was important to me. So as soon as, you know, I saw that in two actors, or maybe 3 or 4 actors, then the chemistry reads kind of progressed. But that to me was important, is how they worked off of each other, and do I believe that you are, you know, in love in this couple.
And it sounds like it comes from not so much an intellectual place, but from that gut, that feeling, that intuition that you kind of get that's unsaid.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that goes back to, you know, not to repeat myself, but that goes back to watching two people on the screen where, yeah, I see them hugging, yes, I see them kissing, I see them having a sex scene or whatever it is, but am I buying it? Like, do they seem like they're in love? Do they seem like they have those, you know, small little tendencies that couples have been, that develop, that have been together for a long time, you know? And I want to see that. And so, yeah.
Cool. How many days did you guys shoot?
We were scheduled for 10 days, but because we lost the river location, very last minute at the end, technically we shot for about 12 days, I guess, yeah. Because like I said, 2 months after principal photography, we finished the film and shot a couple more scenes, including the river scene, which actually worked out better because the new river scene was 100 times better. It was one of those things where, like, the film gods were like on our side, like, no, don't shoot there. Something better is coming up, and that is exactly what happened. We lost it, but we got something better.
That a lot of filmmakers sit there and say that, so you're not the only one. Give us some behind-the-scene glimpses. We saw the final product, but what happened to make a certain scene happen? Did the dog stop barking for 5 seconds? Did the police give you an extra 2 seconds to shoot something? Talk about that.
I'm just talking about the river scene. I think that's a great example. Again, we lost the location, so 2 months later we were shooting the river. It took forever to find it, but I was very, very stubborn, and we were gonna find the one that was right. But a couple of things. Right, the week before we shot, my grandfather passed away, so I had to fly with family, and that was extremely tough. I mean, extremely tough. But again, it takes an army, and the army that I had back home took care of everything. So all the logistical things were getting done, by producers, by the rest of my crew, to get ready. When I came back, and we have a few days till we shoot. I mean, we did a lot of pre-production anyway, so a lot of stuff was ready, but they had to keep that train going. But in addition to that, the day of shooting the river, which was beautiful, by the way, especially towards the end there, it's a trail for horse riders. So we had a horse that got stuck in the water. It sunk in, and it got to a point where we were scared because I was like, I don't want to see an animal, pass like in front of us. I mean, not just for the film. I mean, just in general. I don't want to see something. We don't want to get depressed at such a happy moment in the film, and so it got stuck, and they were trying to pull it out, and trying to hold its head above water. And I mean, luckily the horse was fine. It caused a little bit of a delay, but I think it got to the point where we were fine, and we were just like, just get the horse to safety and make sure it's cool. But that was interesting. That was interesting because we were all in the middle of the water because we got right in the middle, and camera and everything to shoot that. But that was tough. That seeing the horses or the horse. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about as you moved into post-production. What were some things? Did you feel like you prepared enough, or there's things that you wish you would have done, prepared better? Kind of just talk about sometimes that process into post.
Oh yeah. Again, pre-production meetings were very, very important beforehand. So my editor, who at least for school always works as kind of the post-production supervisor as well. So from the get-go, which is very important, know your workflow. I mean, know exactly if you know what camera you're going to use, if you know what software you're going to use for editing, if you know the final output, meaning is this going to festivals, is this going to go wherever. We had that planned out. So with the editor, with the cinematographer, we knew what the DIT process, which is how you get all the footage from camera to the hard drives on set. So we had that all done, and again, because of pre-production meetings. So even my editor and cinematographer would have meetings on their own, because when it came to being on set and the ACs are bringing footage to the DIT person, which was sometimes my editor, they knew exactly what to do because they're syncing footage, they're syncing the audio. But yeah, all that is pre-production. It's all prep. So it's extremely important because that makes it so much easier. So much easier, in fact, that my editor was editing on set. Like after we get so much footage in, some scenes are done, she was editing on set. Didn't let me see it though. Like, you know, she kept pushing me away. But
A lot of directors say it's great because in case you miss something, the editor's like, I would really love a pickup here or a shot of this. Was that ever part of the thing, or do you feel like you pretty much knew it and didn't need any kind of like editor feedback during production?
oh no, there was a lot of feedback. We've become so close as that our main crew that we're okay. I mean, it's always private, you know, where we say things, but yes, it's. I guess it's not the same in in the professional world. You know, editors don't just come up to the director in the middle and just say something. But because this was kind of a smaller and a graduate school thing, we are okay with it. And so yes, that would come up a lot because beforehand during pre-production, I talk to the editor and say, okay, this is kind of how I want to how I envisioned in my head to be edited. Is there something that I missed on my shot list, or what do you think that a cutaway or whatever coverage, because we had those two cameras. So those discussions happened beforehand, and then during, yes, where she would, keep a keen eye out for something. It's like, how are you going to cut this? Or how are you planning to cut this? It's like, oh, well, we got this other shot. Oh, okay. So yes, there was always that, but it was always for the story. It was always to back each other up, not, but yes, that does happen, yeah.
It's just a huge time saver as well, and like money and everything.
Yes.
Especially for the independents and the short films, it's sometimes almost needed that process happens. Talk about, did you, like you said, had a plan since pre-production of film festivals. Talk a little bit about that process. Deliverables is something that a lot of times first filmmakers don't realize, oh, I need this, this, and that, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, our whole plan was to get into festivals, and festivals are kind of a tricky thing because you have to set a budget for them because they can get so expensive if you submit to a lot. And you kind of have to submit to a lot because not all of them will accept you, and sometimes it's nothing to do with the film, it's just the theme, the time slots, and all that. So that was worked in. Yeah, I mean, some of the interesting things were, at least, especially for the director and cinematographer, I guess, is how what the look of the film is going to be like, and how it looks on different screens, either in a theater, on a computer screen, on your phone, and we made different versions of the film. So depending on where it's playing, we have a different export of the video, like, different color space and stuff where, this looks better because we've tested and we saw what it looked like, and it was like, ah. And so that was part of it too, where, we have different versions for festivals or whatever. But, that was all part of the plan, yes.
And that was all within your budget as well? That was since pre-production?
Yeah, it was part of the budget. And then because we had to shoot the river scene, God, just the river scene, we had to shoot 2 months later, it just killed it. And it did dip into the budget. But, after the film was made and, I still had that budget for, personal financing as far as the festivals. But, as it goes, you come up with some extra money and you submit and kind of do your research on festivals. So, yeah, so
it worked out.
Yeah, well, semi. Yeah, we got into festivals, so I guess it worked out.
We usually end with kind of like last bit of nugget of advice. So for those writing, directing, or producing maybe their first short, if they could remember one or two things, and like, what would you leave them with now that you've done it?
Okay, two things. Well, I guess for me, for the first thing would be, write something that's important to you if you're going to be a writer, director, or just directing. write or direct something that's going to be important to you, or at least that has a message that you really, really believe in, especially as a writer, because a good message, a good story is going to attract talented people. It's going to attract talented actors who want to play that role because they want to play that role because it's challenging, it's an interesting character. And it'll attract crew that want to work on your film. And with that comes work with a good crew. Surround yourself with people that are going to make yourself better, that are going to hold your head above water, because I'll tell you, I had a lot of that, where my crew just kept me in check. I mean, as a director, you have so much stuff going on that surround yourself with a good crew that's cares about the story, that cares about you, and that's going to hold the story up, above water, and the film above water. So those are my two nuggets, I guess.
That's great. I think we should give him a hand and say thanks for coming out.